Okay, so we are then finishing up, right? Getting ready to go fully back into ordinary time. This is the solemnity of the most holy body and blood of Christ. So also Corpus Christi Sunday, which obviously I think that that's a good way to look at the Franciscan heritage of South Texas, right? That you actually have the town of Corpus Christi besides San Antonio, San Angelo, San Marcos, et cetera, et cetera. But you actually have the town of Corpus Christi. So the most holy body and blood of Christ, and this will finish up Easter season, and then we go into next Sunday will be the 12th Sunday in ordinary time. So we're back in ordinary time for the rest of the summer. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and do the prayer, and then we'll jump right into this. Today is the feast of, I'm trying to read this. It is Marcellinus, and Peter, who were two early church, early martyrs. So, all right. So, if you would, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, watch over us by day and by night in the midst of life's countless changes. Strengthen us with your never-changing love. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. So before we get started, just as we're thinking about this, and as we are thinking about the kind of the big mark of the sacramental life and the idea of sacrifice, the idea of salvation, the idea of suffering, bringing about salvation, of all of these things. Well, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And while we do that, I want to, let me see if I can find it. I hope I didn't lose it. Well, I wanted to find this. I have moved my bookmark, and now I can't find where it was. So maybe I'm not going to do this, but it was I can tell you what it was. So it was so C.S. Lewis was talking about this whole idea of Christianity is not designed to bring about happiness. And I thought that's an odd, and this was during, and it was part of an interview he was giving. And the interviewer asked him, what religion would you suggest to people that's going to make them happy? And he said, well, certainly not Christianity. And Lewis said, if you want to be happy, probably the way to go is just like an ego-driven atheism, just selfishness. He said, that's what's going to really make you happy. He said, if you mean the type of happiness that I think you mean, worldly happiness, he said, I don't need religion to make me happy. He said, all I need is a bottle of port, right? And I'll be happy, at least for a while. And what C.S. Lewis was getting at, he said, the point of Christianity is not to make you happy. It is to bring you joy, but those are two different things. But he said, the point of Christianity is to bring you eternal life. And in that eternal life, we find perfect joy, which is not the same thing as material happiness. And he said, people who spend their lives pursuing material happiness, they will find that it will work for a while. You know, I have friends who are not religious or call themselves atheists or agnostics or whatever, or even if they don't, they don't practice any kind of real faith. And you know, I could say they seem to be quote unquote happy, but the problem that I see is that this happiness, like any happiness, happiness is fleeting. It doesn't last, or it doesn't last in the way you think it's going to. How's that? Um, and I apologize to Matthew for a conversation we were having earlier, but the etymology of the word happiness is the same root word in Old English that we get the word like happenstance, right? Which literally means it's an accident. You know, finding $20 on the ground makes you happy. Okay. The love of your family is not happiness. That is joy. And joy is something different than happiness. Joy is, to mix up words now, joy is the happiness that is still there even when things aren't going well. Okay. You know, I would say, you know, like hopefully the love you experience with family or friends or whatever it may be, that's joy, because even when things are not going well, that love is still there. That joy is still there. Whereas happiness would be, I don't know if any of you, you know, especially when, you know, when we were all younger, you know, I know my youngest brother, he used to talk about, you know, having good time friends, right? They were friends that were great to be around when everybody was having a good time, but your friendship didn't go any further than that. You know, they are not the person you're going to call when you're in trouble. They are not the person that's going to come help you when things are bad. They're not going to sit with you when you're depressed or anything like that. They are the people at the bar that will have fun with you while you're there, and then you all go your separate ways. And when you walk in next weekend, they're all happy to see you, but that's as far as it goes. And so if all we pursue is happiness, it will eventually go away, and you will be always looking. And you know, the worst part of it is, I think mostly it is young people that live like this. And I think part of the reason is because and I say this realizing how ridiculous it sounds, but I think there is almost some sense of, I'm never going to get old, right? That they believe that what they're doing now is never going to change. Then one day they're going to wake up and they're going to realize that all these things that used to make them happy don't make them happy anymore. And the purely materialistic attempt at fulfilling themselves is going to get harder and harder, because they're not the same person anymore, and the other people aren't the same person anymore. So anyway, so just something to think about as we're going through this. Happiness versus joy, and what Christ promises is joy, but very often joy comes through suffering. Is this did you actually find it? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So here we are beginning in Exodus. In Exodus, since this is the body and blood of Christ, we are introduced to the idea of what we would call like a sacramental sacrifice. Okay, a sacrifice for the expiation of sin. Sacrifice was already, okay, Moses did not invent the idea of sacrifice. Sacrifice was well established in the world by this point. But what you have here is now the sacrifice not being offered to appease God, which was the pagan understanding of sacrifice, but it is offered as, where we get the term scapegoat, right? It is offered as a stand-in for the sins of the people. to put them back in God's good graces. And let me clarify that for just a second. So in the pagan world, the sacrifices are offered not to repair the relationship from the human side with the gods. It was not that the humans had sinned against a perfect, loving God, and now they were trying to repair that relationship. That was not sacrifice in the pagan world. Sacrifice was, if we don't give, I don't know, just God X, right? If we don't give God X the proper sacrifice, then God X will not bring the rains on the harvest and we will have a famine. Or if we don't give the proper sacrifice to God X, our children won't find good spouses that can pay good dowries or whatever it may be. Okay. So that's the pagan view of sacrifice, where here with Moses, you find not that sacrifice is new, but the approach is new. So let's take a look at Exodus. So it says, Moses came to the people and related all the words and ordinances to the Lord. They all answered with one voice, "We will do everything that the Lord has told us." Moses then wrote down all the words of the Lord, and rising early the next day, he erected at the foot of the mountain an altar and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. So I do like this, because this is, you see the beginning of the Judeo-Christian concept of liturgical space, right? That this is not just anywhere, anytime, but this is the beginning of this idea of a sacred space marked with very specific adornments that represent things that make it sacred. Okay. Then, having sent certain young men of the Israelites to offer holocausts and sacrifice young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord, Moses took half of the blood and put it in large bowls. The other half he splashed on the altar. Taking the book of the covenant, he read it aloud to the people, who answered, "All that the Lord has said, we will heed and do." Then he took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you, in accordance with all these words of his." Okay. So first thing we probably think is, that sounds disgusting. Because not only are they not bathing every day, but now they're not bathing every day covered in animal blood. That's disgusting. So thank goodness we don't do that anymore. Okay. But all right, so let's first look at the offer holocausts and sacrifice young bulls. Okay, so the idea of the young bulls, and what will later be like with Passover, the Passover lamb, is the idea that you are offering an animal that is pure and perfect, okay, and is in some sense representative of the people. All right, so and then the Holocaust means a great fire. So that was, I think, another thing when we, especially as we go into the idea of the body and blood of Christ, one of the things that we have to remember is that in the Jewish tradition, a sacrifice is not complete unless it is consumed. Okay, so I don't want you to think that they're taking these animals and they're killing them and then just burning them into nothing. They would, the killing would be ritual, and then the Holocaust, the burning, would cook the animal, and then they would all eat of it. Okay. So the idea is, again, the sacrifice is not complete until the sacrifice is consumed, which is one of the reasons why at Mass, the priest, at least the priest, must receive from the host and from the cup. Even if no one else in the parish receives communion, the priest must, because the sacrifice is not complete until the sacrifice is consumed. Okay. So this idea of putting the blood in large bowls and splashing it on the altar, he splashes it on the altar because the idea is, again, that the animal being split in two is kind of half of it for God, half of it for the people. But the blood on the altar and then the blood sprinkled on the people is meant to join. Okay. So you have this, again, this idea of covenant, that them taking part in the sacrifice and receiving the sacrifice, they are fully joined in with this scapegoat, which is the bull. Okay. The bull is the scapegoat. I know that doesn't sound right, but the bull is the scapegoat, which really just means that the sins of the people are put on the animal, and God accepts the sacrifice of the animal in place of what would be the really necessary sacrifice, which would be the people. Okay. And this begins this idea of the covenant. This is the blood of the covenant the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. So now this becomes the liturgy of the Jewish people moving forward. And of course they develop more feasts, like the Passover feast will come into play, the Feast of Booths, but all of them will involve sacrifice. Now, a lot of people will ask, rightly so, why a sacrifice at all? Isn't that just in a lot of ways another version of what sure, you've changed the verbiage around why you're offering the sacrifice, but aren't you just doing what all the other pagan tribes do? You're still offering blood sacrifices in hopes of appeasing the gods, or you could call it God, the gods, whatever. You're still not doing anything different than anyone else is doing. So scripture scholars make several different arguments about this. A book that I would maybe suggest to you, if you feel like reading it, would be a book called The Jewish Roots of the Eucharist by Brant Pitre, Pitrie. The Jewish Roots of the Eucharist. That would be a good one. If you want to get really, really into it, there is, I cannot remember his name. He's it's like a Russian Polish name, but he wrote 3 or 4 volumes of commentary on the Gospel of Mark, and each volume is about 1,000 pages. So if you're really feeling adventurous, you can, Ignatius Press publishes it. And so if you want to just look up commentaries on the Gospel of Mark, they'll have it there. But anyway, but I would say the one by Brant Pitre is a very good introduction into the idea of Jewish sacrifice, or one very much scholarly accepted commentary on the Jewish understanding of sacrifice. So back to the whole idea of, are they not just doing what every other pagan tribe is doing? Yes and no. I would say yes, in the sense that they are offering animal sacrifices. But I would say part of this is, remember, we've talked about it many, many times, that the scriptures are not just, God, it is God revealing himself, but it's also God revealing himself over time. And so when God reveals himself early on, it's kind of like, you've got to do it in the most inoffensive, the most quote unquote normal way possible. I mean, think about it, right? When you meet another person for the first time, you don't just all of a sudden don't just start letting them in on all of your little personal idiosyncrasies. You wait for later, right? You make sure that they know you before you let them in on some of this stuff, right? You have a person, you reveal as the person can handle what's being revealed. Well, how much more so with God? So God is trying to reveal something to them, but you also look, it's not God that is necessarily commanding the sacrifice here as much as it is Moses offering the sacrifice on behalf of the people to God. Okay. If you remember, even in the Psalms, now granted, in Exodus, we're not to the Psalms yet, but you remember in the Psalms, right, that more than all of the sacrifices that could be offered, the sacrifice God really wants is a humble and contrite heart, right? And that's from 600 years before Jesus. Okay. So the idea that the animal sacrifices were necessary for the people, but they were not necessary for God. God did not need the sacrifices. God had nothing to gain from this. This was done purely for the benefit of the people who were part of the ritual, because again, it made the whole idea of absolution real to them by having the sacrifice. The other part of it is it does prepare them. It does prepare them for the sacrifice that is going to come, which will be Christ. It prepares them for the idea that we are all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God. However, through our offering, we have forgiveness. We can repent and be forgiven. And so that's what that's all about. Okay. Any questions about Exodus?
One thing, Jason, on my little book here on about the Feast of Corpus Christi, it's sort of a trivial thing. This feast was first observed in the 13th century, but it was not officially mandated in the church's liturgical calendar until the 14th century.
Yeah.
So it's been around a long time, unlike some of the other ones that came around like in the 50s or something like that.
Well, this is also one of those things. And Becky, I think that's a really interesting point, because that was also when you had, you're big on very public, a lot of the festivities would be centered around feast days. And the Feast of Corpus Christi is one where you would have like Eucharistic processions and things like that, which if you think about the 13th and 14th century, that would have been, that would have actually just been a big party. You would have had the Eucharistic procession, and then you would have had a big, it would have been a day of great celebration. So, so yeah. Anything else? Okay. So just keep in mind this whole idea then of sacrifice. Okay. And the whole idea again of, it is not God who needs our sacrifice. It is us who need some tangible way to approach God. And in the ancient world, this is how they thought that they could do this. All right. So let's move on to the gospel.
Jason,
Yes.
Just a quick question. After the destruction of the temple, the Jewish people couldn't offer sacrifices anymore.
Right.
I know they have like a Day of Atonement or something like that. Would that sort of take that place of the sacrifices?
Yeah, and just so you guys know, the Jewish they do not offer sacrifices anymore, because they don't have a temple, and I think that's actually a really good point, Bob. That they all right. So after the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians, and they're hauled off into exile, obviously they cannot offer sacrifice anymore, and this is where you actually start to see the rise of the group that will become the Pharisees, because they are much more focused on the law and the scriptures, right? Because they can't offer sacrifice. So it becomes less about offering the sacrifices, and it becomes more about living this life in accordance with the law. That's how you would achieve, I mean, they didn't call it salvation, but that's how you would achieve being, in with God, living this righteous life. It's also where you start to see in the exiles, where you start to see really the idea of what today would be like the synagogue coming out of it, because they don't have, again, the temple. So what do they have? They have the word. So they develop a whole additional liturgical sequence that goes along with celebrating God in the Word of God, and that's where, and of course, that's why we today we have, what do we have? We have the liturgy of the Word, and then we have the liturgy of the Eucharist. And for the Jews, it would have been very similar. You would have the liturgy of the Word, that would be synagogue, but then at particular times during the year, you would go to the temple, and there would be sacrifices offered once they were allowed to rebuild the temple. So yeah, and that did become a major issue when they did not have a temple. Was what do we do? And it was a major issue after the destruction of the temple again, which is why the Sadducees basically just disappeared. And that, of course, raises a whole host of other issues. Let's just say that they were able to rebuild the temple. If they were able to rebuild the temple, they would then have to find legitimate people, men, who come from the line of Aaron, because that was where the high priest had to come from, the line of Aaron. So you'd have to have that, and then you'd have to have other people who could trace their genealogy back to being Levites, to act as the lower priests, right? So there'd be a whole host of issues, even if they could rebuild the temple. It's still not even necessarily true, quote unquote, to say that they would be able to offer sacrifice, because they would have to find priests. So anyway, but yes, and that's where you see the divide between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Pharisees are not really into the whole temple sacrifice, where the Sadducees, that is basically that's their whole theology, is the sacrifice at the temple. You hold these high religious feast days, you offer the appropriate sacrifices, and then you're good. Okay. So looking then at Mark's gospel, it says, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples said to him, where do you want us to go and prepare for you to eat the Passover? So he tells them, and of course, it's kind of this moment, right, of Jesus giving them this very detailed description. And it's kind of this magical moment where they go into, and all of this stuff happens, and of course they end up in this room to make preparations for the Passover. And it says, while they were eating, So while they're eating, this is also, just so you know, this is where there are discrepancies, because, you know, some of the Gospels will say that Jesus died on Good Friday, and that was the same day the Passover lamb was killed. So what Passover are they eating here? Some will say that this happens at the beginning of Passover, and that Passover goes on for several days. And yeah, it's just a whole you'd have to get way into some scripture, but that's not the point of what we're doing tonight. Okay, so but looking at it here, so it says, okay, so they're eating. He says, now he took the bread, said the blessing, broke it, gave it to them, and said, take it, this is my body. Okay, so that's the whole idea, the bread. Okay, this is my, and remember, this is all coming after the feeding of the 5,000, where Jesus said, you will eat the body of the Son of Man and drink his blood, or you will have no life in you. Here he's saying, he takes the bread and he says, this is my body. And so, you know, there's already got to be some sense that something is going on. But what Jesus is offering them is it is a sacrifice that is what the church calls the unbloody sacrifice, right? It's not a sacrifice of animals, but rather it's the bread and the wine, because the bread is seen as coming from the earth, and the wine is seen as like kind of the you have kind of the whole humanity and divinity there, right? The wine is seen to be heavenly, and the bread is very earthly. So you have humanity and divinity represented in the blood, in the bread and the wine. Says, then he took a cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, and they all drank from it. He said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which will be shed for many. Okay, so the blood of the covenant would immediately call to mind to the apostles the story we just read from Exodus, right? They would immediately think the blood of the covenant entails sacrifice, and that the blood is spilled on the altar, and that the blood is sprinkled on the people, and that the sacrifice is consumed, and that through all of this, they are absolved of their sin. So, and so when Jesus says this, they would have, you imagine, would have immediately made that connection. So it's kind of the idea that they know, and again, they know something is going to happen, but they're obviously, just like if we were all sitting around at a table and somebody started saying this kind of stuff to us, we probably by now, because Jesus has been talking about going into Jerusalem for a while, we all have an idea something is going to happen, but we're not necessarily sure what that something is going to be. So he says, this is my blood of the covenant, which will be shed for many. Amen, I say to you, I shall not drink again the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. Okay, so here, this is him again alluding to the coming passion, death, and then the resurrection. Then after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So you have all the prescription of like the blessing, the institution of the Eucharist, and all of this right here. You have the changing of the idea of sacrifice from the bloody sacrifice to the unbloody sacrifice. Now, in other Gospels, right, Jesus tells them, do this as often as you meet in remembrance of me. In John's Gospel, it's directly tied to the Passover, really tied to the Passover, even to the point of John listing all 4 cups of the Passover meal, right? So in different Gospels, it's a little bit different, but you still have this idea that Jesus he has told them that unless they eat his body and drink his blood, they will not have life in them. And now he's saying this bread, which is blessed, which is blessed by God in this liturgical act, is now his body, which they will eat. They must consume. This wine, which has been blessed by him, is now his blood, which must be consumed. This is also part of the theology of, within of the sacramentality of the priesthood, right? We don't say, Father Bob does not consecrate the Eucharist. Father Bob stands in persona Christi. It is God, it is Christ who consecrates the Eucharist. Okay, it is Christ who blesses. That's also, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but pay attention this Sunday. After, he blesses the host, right? And then if you pay attention, when he puts it back down, he breaks it, right? There's always the one big host that after the blessing, it's broken. And that's what this has come from. He took the bread, said the blessing, and broke it and said, "This is my body." So this, the liturgy is literally pulled right out of the scriptures. And you see even the liturgical actions are pulled right out of the scriptures, where the bread is blessed, then broken. The cup is blessed, thanks is given, and then they drink from it, right? So that's, you have all of this right there. Okay. Any questions about that? Any thoughts, comments?
They mention in this book here, it says about how this isn't a continuous reading, and that there is a break between, and they said that it's the omission of certain verses is to present to the congregation which is most helpful from a pastoral perspective, and that sometimes a full reading might be too long, or verses that are problematic, so that they are given permission to admit problematic verses in order to do that. And it provides a sandwich, it said, between these two things. So they take out the middle stuff that mucks it up.
But if you want to, you could you can see the readings. It's 12 to 16 and then 22 to 20. You could easily go and read those omitted verses on your own. I guess the last thing I want to kind of say about this, and we'll see we'll see Paul talk about it in the letter to the Hebrews coming up, but it is also that in this moment, Jesus is acting as both priest and sacrifice, right? He is the priest and the victim at the same time. He is the one blessing the bread, but then the blessed bread is his body. He is the one blessing the cup, but the cup is his blood. So he's showing that he is both high priest and victim. So that's part of that priest, prophet, king. Okay. So then Paul, when we go into the Hebrews, I'm also going to clarify, just in case you were wondering, I am going to say Paul, for lack of a better term. There's a lot of scholarly debate, and I think most scholars agree Paul probably did not write the letter to the Hebrews. Okay. But it is attributed to him. So just for ease of conversation, we're going to say Paul. Okay. And I can also tell you it really doesn't matter. So they're not going to take it out of the Bible because they find out Paul didn't write it. It's not going anywhere. So as brothers and sisters, although I will say, if you read it, and I'm just going to say this, it does sound like Paul. And whoever did write it seemed to be very familiar with Paul's other writings. And they seem to like to write in the style of Paul, where they have one sentence that has about 80 words in it. So I don't know. Maybe it was Paul. So he says, brothers and sisters, when Christ came as high priest. So there you go. Of the good things that have come to be, passing through the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made by hands. That's death and resurrection. That is not belonging to this creation. This is still one sentence. Not made by hands, that is, not belonging to this creation. He entered once for all into the sanctuary, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. So so in a true Pauline form, that was all one sentence. And but you look at what he's saying. He's saying that he is priest and victim, right? That as the high priest, he is able to enter into the Holy of Holies, but he's not entering it just into any Holy of Holies. He is allowed to enter into the greater and more perfect tabernacle. That is the true full presence of God, the resurrection, the passion, death, and resurrection. And this is the sanctuary. And in this sanctuary, it is not the blood of goats and calves, but rather it is his own blood that is required to enter into this sanctuary, thus obtaining eternal redemption. So the reason we can have the unbloody sacrifice is because Jesus's bloody sacrifice is a once and for all. Okay. You cannot have a more perfect sacrifice, so therefore there is no need of any further sacrifice other than, and so what we would say is, in the Jewish sense, which again, in that book, The Jewish Roots of the Eucharist, Pitry gets into this idea of the Jewish understanding of the word remembrance, or whatever it would be in Hebrew, remembrance, or to remember. So even though Jesus's sacrifice was perfect, and this is where, there is some argument, right, with our Protestant brethren, that they say, well, if Jesus's sacrifice was once and for all and it was perfect, then why do we need to have the sacrifice of the Mass every day? And the answer is, we don't have the sacrifice of the Mass every day. We join in the eternal sacrifice, but because we are temporal, we are not recreating the sacrifice. We are, with the unbloody sacrifice, we are joining in to the one sacrifice. Okay. I'm trying to think of a good analogy for it, and I can't really think of one. I guess I would think about, like, if any of you ever seen those, like those charts where you'll have the circle in the middle and it says, that would be Jesus, right? Jesus's sacrifice, Good Friday to Easter Sunday, is in the middle. And then out here, you have all these other little circles that, this is St. Peter's Church, St. Clair, St. Bernadette, Mary Queen, St. Mary's, and they all have a line going to that one, right? We are not re-sacrificing. We are not recreating. We are joining into the heavenly liturgy. That's the idea. It is the temporal joining the transcendent. Okay. That there is the heavenly liturgy that is timeless, and we in time, through the Mass, are entering into the timeless heavenly liturgy. Right.
Jason, is that what Father JJ, he came to RCA one time and he did a thing on it. Is that Zucker, or it's called Zucker or something like that?
I'm not familiar.
No, there's some term like that it sounds like Zucker or whatever, but it has to do with that being present on the altar at this.
Yeah, and that's maybe that's the Hebrew word that I don't know. That is,
well, yeah, he mentioned that it's an unusual term. So
it's well, that's again. So, like, like when we say, like in the Mass, when we say, do this in memory of me, in Hebrew, in the Jewish connotation, memory or remembrance does not mean calling to mind something that was in the past. It means a literal joining in with the eternal. Okay, so when Jesus says, do this in memory of me, he doesn't mean do this and think about me when you do it. He means do this and join in to this moment wherever you are geographically, however far you are removed temporally, you are joining in by doing this in memory of me. So that's where that comes from. It's a hard concept. A lot of people. I'm gonna go ahead and say this though. If any of your, again, your Protestant friends want to challenge you on this, I would just ask you to look up on YouTube. See, it's I think it's UVC Motorsports in Alvin that have the billboard over on 528, where if you buy a new tractor from them, they will give you a free gun and a free Bible and a free American flag. As with every purchase of a new tractor, you could do, that's John Calvin's legacy right there. Okay, so if they want to get on to you about our Mass, you can say that's what John Calvin gave us. That's his legacy right there, is that if I buy a tractor, you will give me a free Bible and a free gun. So, okay. Although I apologize now if any of you are thinking I need to go tomorrow and buy a tractor. So, but they do have a TV commercial, and it is on YouTube, and it is ridiculous. So, anyway, all right. So let's get back into this then. So then Paul goes on and says, "For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of a heifer's ashes can sanctify those who are defiled, so that their flesh is cleansed, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our consciences from dead works to worship the living God?" So here he's saying there is no further need of this type of sacrifice, because if you as Jews, remember it's the letter to the Hebrews, if you as Jews believed that through the sprinkling of the blood of animals you could be cleansed, how much more so does the blood of Christ cleanse you? Because he is the Son of God being offered back to God in the Spirit of God, unblemished. Okay, so there is again no more need of sacrifice. He says, "For this reason, he is mediator of a new covenant," high priest, right? Who is the priest? The priest is the mediator between the people and God. "For this reason, he is mediator of a new covenant." And the new covenant is this: since a death has taken place for deliverance from transgressions under the first covenant, those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. So the idea is that because of Christ's death, he is now the mediator. He is the high priest. And that death took place as deliverance for transgressions under the first covenant, which was the law of Moses. Those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. So again, the idea is that because of Christ's sacrifice, no further sacrifice is necessary, and because of Christ's sacrifice, we can be forgiven. That we can be forgiven for where we have failed under the first law. We are now under a new covenant, which is a law of love, right? A law of forgiveness, a law of generosity. It is a law that says Jesus gave himself for us, and so we give ourselves to Christ. Okay, That is a new covenant and a new law. So I also think it's interesting that really very few religions around, no major religions in the world do animal sacrifice anymore. I guess if you maybe some voodoo or something, you could get some animal sacrifices. If you go down to what is it, Matamoros, where all the witches were. You go down there, maybe find some animal. You guys remember that? Anybody? Okay, thank you, Tom. Somebody does. Yeah, if you're bored and you're not from Texas, look up the Matamoros witches. There you go. It's bizarre. So anyway, but that's it. So we don't do that. We don't need to. And it is, however, it is Jesus's body and blood that comes to us in the unbloody sacrifice of the Eucharist that is now the sacrifice, and we are saved through it. That there is grace, there is salvific grace offered through the receiving of the Eucharist. I don't know how many of you knew this. If you receive the Eucharist, it because it is a sacrament, even in receiving the Eucharist, all of your sins are forgiven, right? Obviously not the sins that are so bad you need to go to confession for, but then if you shouldn't be receiving communion anyway, if you have sins, unconfessed sins that are mortal sins anyway, but all venial sins would be forgiven through the grace of receiving the Eucharist. That's, that, and I think that's something, it's interesting to see how society undulates, but in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance, the struggle was nobody was receiving communion. That's why the church had to say you have to receive communion at least once a year on Easter, right? Because everybody thought that they were so sinful that they could not receive communion. And so, especially with the Second Vatican Council, there was really a resurgence of no, the people you need to, I would imagine none of us have ever been counseled by a priest not to receive communion. And so the idea would be that, yes, if you are under pain of unrepentant mortal sin and you have not been to confession, you should not receive communion until you have been to confession. But other than that, we should be receiving communion. We need communion. It's what sustains us day to day, week to week, right? That's that, that jolt of grace, I guess you could say that we need. So, okay. Anything before we close? You're all going to go look up the thing in Alvin. I know that as soon as we close, you will not be disappointed. You will be disappointed. You'll be absolutely disappointed, but it'll be funny. So, but you will say, yep, this is where we live. So, all right. So, well, if you don't have anything, then I will let you guys go, and I will see you next week. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and close it. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. And I hope all of you have a good week, and I will see you around. And don't forget the potluck. Welcome back. Potluck is between the 9 and I think is it at 10 o'clock Sunday morning. Potluck after Mass.
After 9 o'clock Mass.
What's that? Say that again, Tom.
After the 9 o'clock Mass.
Yeah, after the 9 o'clock Mass. And the PLC will be open before the 9 o'clock Mass if you want to drop food off. But obviously the whole parish is welcome. So if you feel comfortable and you feel like coming, hopefully it'll be a nice reunion. So with that, I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you around.